How's it going? Nate Mumford, as always, still in quarantine here in Danbury, Connecticut, but I do have my vaccination appointment, which is awesome. I'm pretty excited. How are you doing? Happy Thursday. It's 11 a.m. Eastern Time. As always, RCS Live. And by the way, today, opening day, which means let's go Mets. Oh, it's this day every year. As a Mets fan, I can tell you, it's hard to explain. It's a thing called hope. And you just assume that, you know what, this year, it's going to be different. And I can tell you for 30 plus years, it has never really been that different. But 2021, who knows? This year could be the year. You always got to have hope, right? Hey, listen, today we're going to talk about Zetta Hot Spare. Zetta Hot Spare Ring, Hot Spare. And essentially the idea there is redundancy. The idea that we have a primary machine and we're going to make another machine that primary source of the content. So you got my Zetta on here. You might notice it's a little bit different, and that's because we officially released Zetta 5.20.1. That's right. Woo! You can upgrade that right now. Of course, we can help you with those bookings too. Just go to rcsworks.com/bookings if you wanted to. And don't forget to check your backups. We are accepting beta users for the new 5.21.1 version. We also have some G Selector 490 has been released as well. Those are those flex clocks. Remember, we talked about that last week. As always, you can see our archive, rcsworks.com/rcs-live. And beta users, check your backups as well. And of course, I have my chat going over here so I can see. Rich, it's no April Fool's there. I'm telling you, the Mets are going to be good this year. I have a good feeling, Rich. Don't you worry. So thanks for checking in. I got over here too. So again, any questions you have, feel free to chime in and we'll answer them live in real time here today. Other featured topics, just so you know, we have a great conversation with John Bonneau, our G Selector Assistant Product Manager. That's coming down the pipeline, as well as a full Zetta news talk as well. That's also coming down the pipeline. So let's dive right into it. This is my Zetta right here. Let's talk about Zetta Hot Spare. Now, full disclosure, it's going to take me longer to probably describe what Hot Spare is than the actual configuration and execution. And that's how easy hot sparing is with Zetta. We have a lot of engineers who love hot spares because of its flexibility and just ease. So what I'm going to do here is open up two windows side by side. I'm going to try to make them somewhat big just because I don't want to distract you from the Zetta in the background that I have here. So I went to configuration and I went to hot spare. Then I open up the tools and the hot spare manager. You'll be setting this. This is a set and forget it window. This is the one you'll be accessing more often, right? So let's talk about the concept of what hot spare is. And good morning, Teresa. How you doing? Hoping all is well. Feel free, by the way, to ask any questions you guys may have. So let's talk about first thing is what is hot sparing? And you'll hear me say, that's why I said earlier, hot spare, hot sparing. It's just the terminology here. I'll make sure you're familiar with that. So the concept of hot spare is that we want to move the primary source of content. But remember, Zetta is an enterprise environment, which means we can have multiple machines accessing the same exact data, right? So one of the things that kudos to Brian Willard and Jeff Ziegler too for helping me out in this one, filling in some of the blanks here and some other tips and tricks. And Brian nailed it on the head. When we describe Zetta Hot Spare, don't think of it as we have this machine and then this machine becomes the primary source, right, Alfonso? The idea is that we want to essentially have, we want to move Zetta's play devices. And that is important because it frees us up, especially with audio over IP, to have a lot of flexibility on how we design our Zetta environment. So taking a step back, I'm going to use the somewhat traditional approach in Zetta. We have the Zetta file server. We have the Zetta sequencer server. That's where all the playout is happening. And then, of course, we have the on-air studio and we have a production studio. The idea is that we have here in the configuration of hot sparing, notice here we're saying audio hot sparing. We're moving these play devices. That's the idea here. So what are the play devices? Configuration, computers. I have this over here because I have a lot of play devices in here. So you can see just Zetta computers. There's my machine. These are all my play devices. And it's important to note that you can see here, I use for my demo database, I have only like kind of, A and B, so to speak, of my virtual audio cables. But you can always double up, right? That's the idea. So you can essentially go and you can have, let's just say, if it's channel number 5, right? Where is 5 and what is 5? 5 could be an audition channel. It could be a secondary sequencer. A lot of options there. So just so you know, in regards to audio over IP or analog, you can duplicate some of these, right? That's the idea here. So that's our play streams. We define them based on the configuration and the stream groups, right? Oop, that's station groups, my bad. Configuration and stream groups. And so again, what we're doing here is we're defining essentially what Zetta is allowed to play and where, right? So you can see there's a sequencer hot spare that's utilizing the, VAC9 and 3 different, elements there versus the traditional RCS sequencer, which is the VAC1, 1, 2, 3, right? So obviously, when you have audio over IP, you have lots of play devices, lots of stream groups. And what you can do here on the left-hand side of my hot spare is define those. And again, just very simply, configuration, setup. We have a video on this entire thing, just so you know. So you can see under playback here, these are some of my stream groups and stream assignments. If you have any questions regarding the stream groups and the play devices, definitely check out. There's a video we have. I believe it's Zetta Back to Basics, I'm not mistaken. It's on our Facebook page. A great video for you to watch over there as well. I did see you, Damien. Hopefully that's improving your quality over there because I think I'm looking good, at least on my end. So, V, let me know if it's a little pixelated or not. I can adjust the resolution here on my end. So what we can do here is we have essentially defined play devices. We have the primary and we have the secondary. Maybe it would help you if I keep this open. I think it might be, right? Because the idea is that we have, you can see here, that's the sequencer RCS hot AC, and that's the sequencer hot spare, right? If you're visually looking at your board, think of it this way. Channels 1, 2, and 3 are the primary sequencer. You might have something like channel 4, 5, 6 be a sequencer hot spare. And if we're talking Axia or Wheatstone, audio over IP, what you can do is say, all right, well, obviously we identify the pot 4 on the board has a, name associated with it. Could be VAC, whatever it is you can see here on my end. And of course, just so you know, VAC is virtual audio cable. That's why we nicknamed it that, just so you know. And what you can do there is essentially you define where that, pot 4, that line VAC9, where does it go, right? In your Axia Wheatstone environment, where does it go? Versus, let's say in Zetta, who is it assigned to inside the Zetta world, right? So when we're talking about doing hot sparing and redundancy and moving things around, what we're moving is the play devices, the stream groups. So you can see here, this is my Studio 2. That's what I called it. The sequencer computer, who's in charge of the sequencer computer, right? We're moving these services down here, that Zetta down the bottom. These services here, right? Who's in charge of those play devices and those sequencers? So what we're gonna do here is we're saying that's my, my sequencer. That's the stream group, right? Sequencer hot spare. That's the hotkeys, the stacks, the Z players, right? And some settings here as well. So what we're doing is we're defining on this Studio 2 who is going to become the primary point of play out. And you can see here, I have the HK for the hotkeys, stacks, hot spare, and the sequencer hot spare. Well, what play devices are those? Well, let me go to our stream groups over here, and you can see they are VAC9, 1, VAC9, 2, VAC9, 3. And those are just simply the way I define them. And you can double up. The one thing I want to make sure you know of is as long as you have the same physical route, just make sure you don't label it the same exact thing, right? We can always point to the same destination, but we want to make sure the naming structure is different. So Zetta knows that it's a different, we're isolating each individual plague container or string group, however kind of you go from there too. All right. So from there, what we want to do is we want to essentially establish, what we're going to do and when, right? That's the idea. And I should point out, by the way, there's no additional licensing for this. This is just a part of your Zetta environment. And what we're doing here is defining what these computers are. This is my demo database. I just have my one laptop in here, but think of this as being more of a 1-to-1 ratio. This hot spare configuration here is more like a sequencer machine or sequencer server. And then we have essentially maybe the on-air control for RCS Hot AC, the top 40 backup, the classic rock on-air machine. And then now in this example here, you can also have something, let's say a production machine. And that production machine can have all of these stations associated with it, right? Right, Rob? So what you can do here is you can essentially go and say, all right, so all of these stations have the ability to utilize Studio 2 to become the primary source of playout. And how do we know what string groups are there? Defined by here based on the computer. So if you have multiple on-air studios, we want those to probably be the backups, be the 1-to-1 relationship. So you'll see, multiple machines here. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are my 4 stations. I might see 4 computers here. Again, hot AC control, top 40 control, classic rock control, splits master control. And then I might have a production machine that has access to all 4. And these are all configured by here. So what a lot of our clients do is they have channels 1, 2, 3 on the board itself are going to be the primary playout, and essentially move to the right-hand side, and something like 7, 8, 9 on the board itself are those different routes, right? These different plague containers. And those are for the hot sparing. So when we do trigger this, we can preview it on the board automatically on the right-hand side. And then maybe you have some type of, WheatNet setup, or again, Axia works too. Love to both those guys. What you can do is have essentially 1, 2, 3 is the hot AC sequencer hot spare. 4, 5, 6 is classic rock hot spare. 7, 8, 9 is, of course, top 40 hot spare, right? So you can have an entire board configuration based on that audio routing. And again, that's all based on the idea that, audio over IP or analog, it's all about your play devices, which can be found, of course, under here. Again, just config and computers. And I put mine up here because it takes a couple seconds to load up all of these different, virtual audio cables, right? Cool. So any questions on there? Let me know. And so again, we talked about the no additional licensing here, right? The idea is that when you pay for this, you're paying for RCS Hot AC. That's your station license. That's your sequencer. If the primary goes down, well, that means you have 0, right? So the secondary goes on, we still have 1. So we're not going to charge you like other people, other people who have other automation systems that have essentially both. We're going to just charge you that one sequencer, and hot spare is part of the environment, right? So let's at this point in time talk about essentially a way to trigger all of this, right? So here is our hot spare play devices. Before I forget, yes, there is live metadata and GPIO hot sparing as well. You can see there's options for ARM and activate both of those. Of course, what a lot of engineers like to do is they take a machine like some, let's say, audio server or some type of another Zetta machine in the environment and make that one be the default service for that particular Zetta function. Remember, services are down here, right? All those individual servers, that makes us allow to have the detached play button so I can close it, reopen it, not affect the on-air product. Same thing applies to things like metadata, the RDS, or a GPIO. The idea is there we have one machine that's always going to be on that essentially is the point person for that service, right? A lot of configurations, a lot of options. It's whatever best for you, your budget, and your system. So just know there's a lot of flexibility there. It's why a lot of engineers like hot sparing, because they can move it pretty easily across the environment. Right, V? Okay. Thank you, V. I'm trying to look. Here we get some video problems over here, but I can't seem to. There's nothing I can really do on my end, unfortunately. But noted, V. Thank you. I'll take a note afterwards. So at that point in time, what we can do here is essentially we define the hot spare, we define the live metadata, the GPIO hot sparing as well. That's in here. So let's talk about triggering this. We already defined this as Studio 2. So we jump to the hot spare manager, right? Tools, hot spare manager. And then essentially we have here is we have the RCS hot AC. These are our stream groups here. And you'll notice there's my Studio 2 as defined by over here in the hot spare configuration. There's two options. There's the arm and activate. The idea is that you want to arm everything. And then from there, you want to activate it. The reason you arm it is because you want to make sure that you're running in parallels, right? That's the idea. Some users prefer to have it in 24/7 parallel, totally fine. Some like just to do it when they're doing some updates or just, again, redundancy backup purposes. They might have it arming, they might hear it, then they'll activate. So the process here you want to focus on is first, you want to arm your hot spare. That's going to be available so you can hear, so for example, if I'm playing this dry, rugged, mission durable sweeper, right? I can hear that on the board when I arm this hot spare. Yep, I know. So it's my one machine, right? So what I can do there is I arm it, and then I can hear it on the board itself. At that point in time, we want to make sure we move the audio routing to air, right? Because don't forget, if we're doing 1, 2, 3 is the primary, then 4, 5, 6 is the hot spare on the board itself. We want to make sure that we have 4, 5, 6 being fed to the transmitter site. So step 1 is to arm it so you can preview the audio. Step 2 is to move the actual route to air. And then step 3 is activate it, which will physically change Zetta and tell Zetta to go from 1, 2, 3 and then move on to 4, 5, 6. It's a very, very simple process. As I said, it's going to take longer for me to explain what hot spare is versus the actual execution. Now, with everything inside of Zetta, if you have any questions, let me know too. And yes, analog works as well. This can be for analog or digital, just so you know. WheatNet, Axia, everything. So we have here, right? We define it in the hot spare. We can trigger it with the hot spare manager. We arm, change the route, and we activate, right? Remember, not moving machines, moving the play devices. Very flexible, which means that we then have the option. I'm going to close both of these for right now. Remember that whole big phrase I said? Nate's compounded remote hybrid workflows? Well, this is where we start to incorporate that compound remote hybrid workflows. So configuration, macros. I created essentially 2 macros here, right? There's the hot spare, activate hot AC, and a return hot AC. And all this is really, we're just doing an execute command right here. We're telling Zetta that all we want to do is we want to go and say, for this here, the task, sequencer, hot spare, activate for the station RCS hot AC, activate the Studio 2 hot spare. That's the idea, right? So again, arm, audio route for air, and then activate. So you'll see the second thing I have, this all gets fired all at once in one, hot spare macro. I then, of course, have, hey, GPIO, set the route to essentially the different audio on-air route. That's the idea there, right? So activate this, go ahead and change the route, and boom, we're good to go. Now, you might notice here, I may or may not have an arm in this. You wouldn't want to have an arm for an automatic macro, because think about it. The idea of arming is that you're previewing it on the board to make sure you know it works. So why would you use something automatic if you have to be there to manually hear what's going on? Your choice. But again, if we're talking about once you know this is working and it's established, we only really need to go for the automatic macro. Again, activate, change the on-air route. So after that's done, right? So this is to move it from the primary to the hot spare. If we want to move it back, remember, we're not activating it and deactivating it. We're just activating the primary and the secondary. So when we return to the hot AC, what we're saying is go back here, but then go back to the station stream groups as default for RCS hot AC, right? Activate the hot spare, activate the default. That's the idea. But we still have to move our audio routes back to air. So again, we have the activate hot AC, return hot AC. That's the macros. But once we have those macros created, right? So there's my macros. I'll scroll down here. You can see these are all my macros. I have a hot spare, activate RCS hot AC. Take my macro, left click, drag, put in the hotkey. Boom. There's my hot spare, activate hot AC. I can right click on this, set a custom name, and this could be activate hot AC hot spare, right? Hit OK there. And then once that changes, boom, there's activate hot AC hot spare. I can give it a nice little cool color. We'll give this a color of what? What are you thinking? We'll do a nice little purple, maybe? Something purple. There you go. Right? Cool. Great. That's there. Don't forget, now that it's in a hotkey, it's available for you over on Zetta to go as well. So if you're an engineer, perhaps you have an engineer profile that only has access to an engineer hotkey bank that has a bunch of both audio and non-audio triggers. One of those audio triggers could be essentially activating the hot spare and reactivating the default play devices or stream groups. All that makes sense? And you can see, by the way, that same macro could be into an actual clock structure. So we can go over here to the, actual clocks, right? Pick a station. I think I have classic rock on here right now. I can pick a day over here. I can take that same exact macro, drag it into the log structure here, and you can see that back in my clocks, there's my macro. Now, of course, this is for hot AC versus classic rock. That's the X. But you can see exactly what I'm talking about here, that you can put it in your clocks automatically or put it manually here on a hotkey trigger. Make sense? Any questions for anybody else in there? So I can see I'm checking in you guys here. I'll give you a couple seconds to ask any questions. Jason, Rob, any questions? Ba-ba-bum. Kai, it's all good. I just saw your comment there. It's all good. So any questions regarding hot spare? I'll do my quick 3-minute recap over here to get your questions in so I can answer them live in real time. So again, I'm talking about configuration, hot spare, tools, the hot spare manager. Make these nice and big so you can see them here. And when we're talking about hot sparing, we're talking about moving the play devices. We define those play devices in configuration, computers, and then we go and, of course, have these stream groups that are right here to figure out, and isolate what is the primary, what is the hot spare. We define these in the hot spare configuration window. Treat this as a 1-to-1 ratio. If you have a sequencer server, then, of course, you have some type of on-air. So the Zetta RCS hot AC on-air control room would have its own, let's say, hot spare that has a sequencer hot spare for RCS hot AC, right? And at that point in time, I can go over here and then I can arm this so I can preview the audio. Yes, I know. I can preview the audio and then I can activate the audio not only after I go and change the play route, right? Arm, play route to air, and then activate. That's the idea. If you do have, let's say, some type of automatic macro, you can skip the arm because you've already previewed it already on your end. And of course, if you have an on-air board, we're talking about 1, 2, 3, maybe 7, 8, 9. When you trigger the actual hot spare, we have it already on the board, ready to go via analog or audio over audio over IP. Sorry, I was checking some questions over here. Going through the list here. Thomas, sorry, I cannot speak Polish. My apologies. My sincere apologies. Let's see here. And Kai, for example, Kai was saying, I'll give you some love here, Kai. Kai was saying, yeah, so they have the hot spare with 5 different on-air studios integrated with Dante, as well as an automation server as well. So you can see exactly how these are kind of implemented across the board. And again, with compounded remote hybrid workflows, We then start to incorporate the idea of we make this a macro, we put into a hotkey, we can fire this remotely from Zetta to Go. So if you are, let's say, remote, you're an engineer with multiple markets, multiple studios, you can do some hot sparing with Zetta to Go. And if it's already configured on the board, you just tell your jocks, instead of 1, 2, 3, pot up 7, 8, 9. And again, that includes live metadata and GPIO, if not already configured, in a different machine that's more dominant, right? Last call for questions. Last call for questions. Thank you, Thomas. I'll give you a little extra love here, Thomas. Sorry that I cannot speak Polish. That's my bad. Right? Hot sparing. Efficient, flexible. Again, not moving machines, removing play devices. No additional licensing there either. I'm going through my notes to make sure I'm not forgetting anything here. We did the stations, we did RCS, we did the ARM, we did the maintenance. Yes, we're good to go. We're good on questions too. I will see you next Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern time, doing a conversation with John Bonneau in G Selector, talking everything about scheduling. And John will be there to answer your questions, right from a guy who helps design it, right? That's the idea there too. So thank you so much. Be happy, healthy, safe, all that good stuff. I'll see you next Thursday. Have a great weekend.